Prague. May 27, 1942. 10:35 in the morning. A hairpin curve in the Liban district. An open-top Mercedes carrying the second most powerful man in Nazi Germany. His name was Reinhard Heydrich. He was 38. Hitler called him the man with the iron heart. 4 months earlier, at Wannsee, he had organized the Holocaust. A young man stepped into the road. He raised a British Sten Mark II submachine gun. He pulled the trigger from 4 meters from Heydrich's chest. The Sten jammed. The bolt did not move. The shooter's name was Josef Gabčík. He was 30. He was a Slovak from a village called Polovci. Across the street, a second man named Jan Kubis pulled an anti-tank grenade from a briefcase. He threw it at the rear wheel of the Mercedes. What happened in the next 8 days, 8 weeks, and 84 years is what this video is about. Watch for Lidice. Watch for the church. Watch for Karel Čurda. Reinhard Heydrich was born in Halle, Germany, on March 7, 1904. His father was an opera composer. He played the violin to professional standard. He joined the SS in 1931 at the personal recommendation of Heinrich Himmler. By 1936 he ran the Sicherheitsdienst. By 1939 he ran the entire Reich Security Main Office. January 20, 1942. A villa at Wannsee outside Berlin. Heydrich chairs a 90-minute conference with 14 senior Nazi officials. The agenda, the extermination of European Jewry. He was, in that single morning, the chief architect of the industrialized murder that would kill 6 million Jews. The protocols were typed by Adolf Eichmann. 30 copies distributed. 5 months earlier, on September 27, 1941, Hitler had appointed Heydrich acting Reich Protector of Bohemia and Moravia, the German occupation administration of what had been Czechoslovakia. Within 72 hours of arriving in Prague, Heydrich had ordered 404 Czechs executed by firing squad. He called it his introduction. He gave it on Czech radio. He ran the protectorate from Prague Castle. He lived with his wife Lena and 4 children at Paninsk-Brezhny Manor, 22 kilometers north. He commuted daily by car. He drove without escort. He believed the Czech population had been thoroughly subdued. He believed it because his recent execution rates suggested it. He was wrong. 1,200 kilometers away, in a country house at Cholmondeley Castle in Cheshire, England, the Czechoslovak government in exile of President Edvard Beneš decided that Heydrich must be killed. The decision was made personally by Beneš in October 1941. He had read the execution lists. He gave the order to his intelligence chief, Brigadier General František Moravec. Moravec ran Czechoslovak military intelligence in London. He had escaped Prague the morning the Germans entered, March 15, 1939, with 11 officers and the agency's most sensitive files. He recruited his assassins from Czechoslovak units of the British Army stationed in Leamington Spa. He needed paratroopers fluent in Czech and Slovak who could pass for civilians in occupied Prague. He selected 2 men. The first was Josef Gabčík, born in Polovci, Slovakia, on April 8, 1912. He was a metalworker. He was small, dark, intense. The second was Jan Kubis, born in Dolny Vilimovice, Moravia, on June 24, 1913. He was a farmer's son. He was tall, blond, quiet. He had served in the French Foreign Legion. They trained for 14 months at the British Special Operations Executive School at Cholmondeley Castle. The training included parachuting, sabotage, hand-to-hand combat, demolition, and Sten submachine guns. The mission codename was Anthropoid. The Greek word means manlike. Moravec chose it himself. He never explained why. The operation fell to Major Henry Sustre. On the night of December 28, 1941, Gabčík and Kubis boarded a Halifax bomber of the Royal Air Force 138th Squadron at RAF Tangmere on the Sussex coast. Their drop zone was supposed to be near Plzeň, in western Bohemia. Cloud cover and navigational error placed them, instead, in deep snow near the village of Nevězdy. Gabčík sprained his ankle on landing. Kubis sheltered him in a forester's hut. By morning they had located, by chance, a member of the Czech anti-Nazi resistance. From January through May of 1942, the two paratroopers lived in a network of safe houses across Prague. They were sheltered by approximately 40 Czech families. The penalty was death. They studied Heydrich's daily commute for over 4 months. They watched the Mercedes leave Paninsk-Brezhny at the same time each morning. They watched it return each evening. They identified a specific bend on the road in Prague-Liben where the Mercedes was forced to slow to 20 km per hour. The bend was a tram crossing on V. Holsovikakak Street. They selected May 27th as the day. Heydrich was scheduled to fly to Berlin that evening to receive a new posting. They had to act before he left the city. On the morning of May 27th, the two assassins took up positions at the curve at 5 minutes past 10. Gabčík carried a Sten in a coat-folded raincoat. Kubis carried 2 grenades. A third paratrooper, Josef Valsik, age 27, was stationed 100 meters up the hill with a small mirror. His role was to flash a signal when Heydrich's Mercedes appeared. The Mercedes was 45 minutes late. Heydrich had spent the morning playing with his 3-year-old daughter Silka in the garden of Paninsk-Brezhny. He left the manor at 10:28. His driver was SS Oberscharfer Johannes Klein. The car was a 1940 Mercedes-Benz 320 Cabriolet B, license plate SS3, painted dark green, top folded back in the warm spring weather. At 10:35, Valsik flashed his mirror. Gabčík stepped into the road. He raised the Sten gun. He pulled the trigger from 4 meters from Heydrich's chest. The Sten gun jammed. The bolt did not move. The cause was later identified as oil contamination on the magazine spring, picked up during 4 months in a damp Prague safe house. Heydrich, instead of ordering Klein to accelerate away, ordered him to brake. He stood up in the open car. He drew his Luger pistol. He aimed it at Gabčík. Across the street, Jan Kubis pulled the grenade from his briefcase. It was a modified British No. 73 anti-tank grenade. He pulled the pin. He threw it at the rear wheel. The grenade fell short. It detonated against the right rear wheel of the Mercedes, not inside the passenger compartment. The blast threw fragments of metal, glass, and horsehair seat stuffing in every direction. Heydrich was thrown forward against the windshield frame. Klein, the driver, was knocked unconscious. The Mercedes engine stalled. Bystanders on the sidewalk screamed and ran. Kubis, his face cut by his own grenade fragments, drew a Colt 38, ran for a hidden bicycle, and escaped through a tram-stop crowd. Gabčík fled in the opposite direction. Heydrich pulled himself out of the wrecked Mercedes and fired 6 rounds from his Luger at the fleeing Kubis. He missed every time. He then collapsed onto the curb. A passing Czech baker named František Safrik stopped his delivery van. Heydrich was placed in the back among the bread crates. The van drove him to the Bulovka hospital, 2 kilometers north. His wounds were initially diagnosed as superficial. A broken rib. A punctured diaphragm. Minor lacerations. The German surgeon Walter Dick believed he would recover within 10 days. The diagnosis was wrong. The horsehair seat stuffing, driven into Heydrich's chest cavity by the explosion, carried bacteria the surgeons could not control. By June 1st he was septic. Hitler personally dispatched his physician Theodor Morell from Berlin. Morell brought sulfa drugs. The sulfa was insufficient. The penicillin that would have saved Heydrich was held by the Allies in North Africa. Reinhard Heydrich, age 38, died at 4:30 in the morning of June 4, 1942. He was the only senior Nazi successfully assassinated by Allied agents in the entire Second World War. Hitler was informed within 30 minutes. His response was a single sentence. Heydrich, the man of iron, has been killed by snipers paid by London. He then went silent for 3 hours. Hitler initially ordered 10,000 Czech civilians shot at random. The order was reduced after his armaments minister Albert Speer pointed out the cost to wartime industrial production in the Protectorate. The reprisal that was carried out was, instead, focused on a single village. The village was called Lidice. It was 22 kilometers northwest of Prague. Its population, 493. The choice of Lidice was based on false intelligence. The Gestapo had intercepted a letter from a married woman in nearby Slaney to her lover, who lived in Lidice. The letter mentioned, in passing, a missing relative. There was no actual connection between Lidice and the assassination. The relative was not a paratrooper. The lover was not in the resistance. The letter was, by every standard of intelligence, worthless. It would kill 201 civilians and destroy a village. The Gestapo wanted a target. The letter would do. On the night of June 9, 1942, units of the SS Sonderkommando under SS Hauptsturmführer Max Rostock surrounded Lidice. At dawn, every male resident over 15 was assembled in the orchard of Farmer Horak. 173 men, ages 15 to 84, were shot in groups of 10 against the Horak barn wall. The shooting began at 7. It ended at 3 in the afternoon. 195 women of Lidice were transported by truck to Ravensbrück concentration camp. Of these, 53 would die there. The remaining 142 would be liberated alive in 1945. 88 children of Lidice were taken to a transit camp at Lodz in occupied Poland. 82 were transported on July 2 to the Chelmno extermination camp. They were gassed within hours. 7 of the Lidice children were judged by SS racial examiners to be capable of Germanization. They were sent to SS foster families in Germany under new Aryan names. 5 were located alive in 1945. Lidice itself was not merely empty. It was destroyed. SS engineers brought in plows, dynamite, and bulldozers. Every building was demolished. The cemetery was dug up. The river was diverted. The village was erased from German maps. A hand-painted wooden sign was nailed to a tree at the edge of the cleared field. It read, in German, Lidice does not exist. 2 weeks later, on June 24, 1942, the same fate was applied to a smaller village called Lizaki, where a paratrooper radio set had actually been hidden. 33 adults were shot. 11 Lizaki children were sent for Germanization. 2 survived the war. The remaining 9 were gassed at Chelmno. Total Czech civilian dead from the Heydrich reprisal sweep, at least 250. Meanwhile, the Gestapo manhunt for the actual assassins continued. By June 15, 21,000 Gestapo officers had been deployed in the Prague area. 13,119 Czechs had been arrested. The reward for information leading to the assassins was set at 1 million Reichsmarks, equivalent to roughly $4 million in 1942 currency, or about 70 million in 2026 buying power. No one came forward. The 2 assassins remained hidden. Czech resistance protected them. Then, on June 16, 1942, a man walked unannounced into a Gestapo office in Prague. His name was Karel Čurda. He was 30 years old. He was, himself, a Czechoslovak SOE-trained paratrooper, dropped into Bohemia in March 1942 as part of a separate operation called Outdistance. He had been hiding for 3 months in his mother's farmhouse. The execution lists at Lidice had broken him. He gave the Gestapo 4 names. He named Josef Gabčík. He named Jan Kubis. He named Josef Valsik. He named Adolf Apaka, the leader of his own outdistance group. He took a portion of the reward. By June 17, the Gestapo had narrowed the location of the 7 surviving paratroopers in Prague to a single building, the Czech Orthodox Cathedral of Saints Cyril and Methodius on Breslova Street. The cathedral had sheltered the 7 men for 10 days. The shelter had been arranged by Bishop Gorazd of the Czech Orthodox Church and the church's senior priest, Father Vladimir Petrek. Both clerics knew the penalty if caught. They had given the men a stone crypt below the nave, accessible only through a narrow trapdoor. They had brought them food at night. At 4 in the morning of June 18, 1942, 800 SS troops under SS Sturmbannführer Heinz von Treuenfeld surrounded the cathedral. They had detailed floor plans. They knew the crypt entrance. 3 of the paratroopers, Adolf Apaka, Jan Kubis, and Joseph Bublik, were sleeping in the prayer loft above the nave. They were the first to be discovered. They opened fire with pistols at close range. The gunfight in the nave lasted 45 minutes. The three killed 14 SS soldiers and wounded 36 before exhausting their ammunition. Aplaka and Bublik used their final bullets on themselves. Kubis died of wounds 2 hours later in a Gestapo ambulance. He had thrown the grenade. He was 28 years old. The remaining four, Josef Gabčík, Josef Valsik, Jan Ruby, and Jaroslav Spark, had retreated into the stone crypt below the church. The crypt was 3 meters wide. The only entrance was a small ventilation grate at street level. The siege of the crypt lasted 4 hours. The SS pumped tear gas through the grate. The paratroopers blocked it with mattresses. The SS pumped water into the crypt with fire hoses. The water rose to the men's knees. Then to their thighs. The 4 paratroopers were down to between 2 and 4 pistol cartridges each. The SS attempted 3 direct assaults down the crypt staircase. Each was repelled by pistol fire. They could hear German engineers preparing dynamite above them. At 10 in the morning, with the water at their thighs and the dynamite charges ready, the 4 men in the crypt did the only thing they could. They turned their pistols on themselves. The 4 shots came in quick succession. The siege ended. When the SS finally entered the crypt at noon, they found 7 dead Czech paratroopers. None had been taken alive. The total cost of taking them, 14 SS killed, 36 wounded, and the deaths of 248 Czech civilians during the wider manhunt. The cathedral was sealed for inspection. Bishop Goraz took full responsibility for the sheltering on September 3, 1942, in a written statement to the Gestapo, in order to protect the rest of the Orthodox community. He was tried, convicted, and executed by firing squad on September 4th. Father Vladimir Petrek was executed the same day. The church sexton Václav Sikl was executed the same day. The Czech Orthodox Church in the Protectorate was banned by Nazi decree. Its property was confiscated. It would not be reorganized as a legal entity until 1945. Karel Čurda was paid the full reward of 1 million Reichsmarks. He was given a new identity, Karl Gerhard, and married a German woman from Karlovy Vary. He worked as a Gestapo informant until 1945. He was captured by Czech police on May 5, 1945, 2 days before the German surrender, hiding in the village of Konetipi. He was tried by a Czechoslovak People's Court in February 1947. He was sentenced to death by hanging. He was hanged at Pankrak prison in Prague on April 29, 1947. He was 35 years old. His last recorded words to the court, when asked why he had done it, were, "I think you would have done the same thing for 1,000,000 marks." The destroyed village of Lidice was rebuilt 300 meters from its original location between 1947 and 1949. The original site was preserved as a memorial. The foundations are still visible in the field. Of the 88 children of Lidice taken in 1942, only 17 returned alive after the war. Most had been gassed at Chelmno. Some Germanized survivors did not learn their true identities until adulthood. The Czech Orthodox Cathedral on Reslova Street was reopened in 1947. The crypt where the 7 paratroopers died is now a public memorial. The bullet holes on the exterior wall were never repaired. The ventilation grate, through which the SS pumped tear gas and water in 1942, is still there in 2026. Tourists place flowers in it. It has been replaced once. Josef Gabčík, the Slovak who had pulled the Sten gun's trigger and seen it jam, was buried in an unmarked grave in 1942. His body was located by Czech authorities in 1945. He was reburied with military honors at Dablis Cemetery in Prague. Jan Kubis was reburied beside him. The 2 graves are visited by Czech schoolchildren every year on May 27. President Edvard Benes, who had personally ordered the assassination from London in October 1941, returned to Prague in May 1945. He was elected president of the new Czechoslovak Republic in 1946. He resigned in June 1948 after the communist coup. He died on September 3, 1948, of natural causes, age 64. His funeral was attended by an estimated 100,000 Czechs. He was asked, repeatedly, throughout the rest of his life whether the assassination of Heydrich had been worth the cost, Liddacy, Lizaki, the manhunt dead, the executions that followed. His public answer in 1947, a nation without men willing to die for it does not deserve to exist. His private diary, same year, I do not know. I will not know. Brigadier General František Moravec, who had run the British end of Anthropoid, fled to the United States in 1948 after the communist takeover. He worked for the Pentagon. He died in Washington in 1966. Reinhard Heydrich was buried, with full SS honors and a personal eulogy by Hitler, in the Invalidenfriedhof Military Cemetery in Berlin on June 9, 1942. The grave was marked by a large stone slab. The grave was destroyed by Soviet artillery during the Battle of Berlin in April 1945. Heydrich's remains were never recovered from the rubble. The location is now an unmarked patch of grass. Lena Heydrich, his widow, raised their 4 children to maintain his reputation. She published a memoir in 1976 titled, Leben mit einem Kriegsverbrecher, Life with a War Criminal. She died in 1985, age 73. The 2 Sten Mark II submachine guns recovered from the assassination site, Gapsik's main weapon and the spare in his coat pocket, are now displayed in the Czech Army Museum in Prague. The museum's display label states the cause of the jam, oil contamination on the magazine spring. It notes the Sten Mark II was usually reliable. The label adds, on this day it was not. Operation Anthropoid was, by any military measure, a success. The chief architect of the final solution was killed. He never replaced anyone. The role passed to Kurt Daluege, a less ambitious officer. It was also, by any humanitarian measure, a catastrophe. 248 Czech civilians dead in the manhunt. 2 villages erased. 192 Liddacy women and children murdered. And it was the only successful Allied assassination of a senior Nazi leader in the entire Second World War. Goebbels, Göring, Bormann, Himmler, all died in the war's final weeks or post-war trials. Only Heydrich was killed by men sent specifically to kill him. The 2 men were 30 and 28 years old. They came from villages most maps did not show. They trained for 14 months. The hairpin curve at Vihosovicakak Street in Prague-Liben was redeveloped in 1973. The tram tracks were removed. There is no marker at the spot. There is, however, a small plaque on a nearby wall. The plaque was placed by the Czech Resistance Veterans Association in 1992. It reads, on this curve, on the morning of May 27, 1942, 2 men acted for a country that was no longer a country. Below the inscription, the plaque lists the names of the 7 paratroopers who died 10 days later in the cathedral. The years run from 1912 to 1920. None of them reached 30. The cathedral itself holds an annual memorial service every June 18. Czech Orthodox priests read the names of the 7 dead. They light 14 candles, 1 for each man and 1 for each cleric executed. In 1995 the Czech Republic posthumously promoted Josef Gapsik and Jan Kubis to the rank of Brigadier General. The decoration was attended by Gapsik's nephew and Kubis's 3 nieces. There is a permanent exhibit in the cathedral crypt. Visitors descend the same staircase the 4 paratroopers defended. The water marks from the SS fire hoses are still visible at thigh height. The marks are not preserved deliberately. They simply did not wash off. The 2017 film Anthropoid, directed by Sean Ellis, was filmed on location at the actual cathedral. The crypt floor in the film, like the crypt floor today, is the same stone floor on which Gapsik stood with water rising to his thighs and fewer than 5 pistol cartridges in his pocket. The question that Operation Anthropoid leaves behind, 84 years after the Sten gun jammed and Kubis threw the grenade, is the same question Ben S. wrote in his diary in 1947 and could not answer. Was it worth it? A nation occupied. An architect of mass murder killed. 2 villages erased. 248 civilians murdered in reprisal. 7 paratroopers dead in a flooded crypt. 1 betrayer, hanged 5 years later. One bishop, shot. Czech historian Tomáš Pasak, in his 1990 study, refused to answer the question. His book ends with one sentence. It reads, in translation, "They acted because they were the men who could act. The cost is what it always was. We do not absolve. We do not condemn. We remember." So this is the question Operation Anthropoid leaves with you. When the tyranny is total and the cost of opposing it falls on the innocent, what is the calculation? The two men made theirs in 14 seconds on a curve in Liban. The bishop made his at his execution. The paratroopers did their part. You will make yours when you decide what to remember.